So today I want to spend a little bit of time talking about Brian Gutekunst because I really truly believe that he is one of the better GMs in the NFL. Since he took over back in 2018, he had to go through a tough process of trying to move on from future Hall of Famer Aaron Rodgers. And I think anytime you're moving off a top-tier quarterback, you have the risk of picking the wrong guy and getting stuck in a period of time where your organization struggles, because when you don't have a quarterback, it's really hard for anything else to go right with your team. You may have one of the best defenses in the NFL, but if you miss on a quarterback, then it's going to be tough to be competitive come playoff time. And Brian Gutekunst was able to find Jordan Love, draft Jordan Love in 2020 when Aaron Rodgers was still playing at a somewhat high level, ended up winning a couple more MVPs after that time. And I think that if Jordan Love hadn't panned out, Gutekunst would not be looked at in such a bright light if the Packers were sitting here and struggling to find success after moving on from Aaron Rodgers, but they were able to find success with Jordan Love playing as a top-tier quarterback. But I want to focus on two moves that have been made by him this season that have really drastically shaped the Packers season up to this point. The Packers now sitting at 6-2. And the biggest one was the decision to trade for Malik Willis, because all throughout training camp and preseason, the backup quarterback battle was going on. We talked about it a lot on this channel. Sean Clifford versus Michael Pratt, two quarterbacks the Packers drafted in the past two drafts, later on. And I had some hope with Sean Clifford after last season, the preseason. Thought he had some nice moments. But both guys just struggled throughout all of the preseason. And the fact that Gutekunst went out to look for a quarterback shows that they didn't have a trust in the scenario that Jordan Love went down, that one of those guys could come in and really, put the Packers where they needed to be when it came to the offense. And so Gutekunst trades a 7th-round pick for Malik Willis right before the season starts. And if you're the Titans right now, you have to be sitting back and thinking, why the heck did I do that? You see Malik Willis playing as he has with the Packers. In his 2 games that he started, he goes 2-0, beats the Indianapolis Colts and then the Tennessee Titans in the 2 games that Jordan Love misses. And then this past week, Jordan Love leaves with around 11 minutes left in the third quarter. Malik Willis comes in. The Packers are up 13-10 at the time. The Jaguars get up 17-13, and Malik Willis gets the Packers to 30 points, 2 touchdown drives, a game-winning field goal drive to put the Packers in a position with McManus to win the game. And the fact that Gutekunst got the production that he's gotten out of Malik Willis for a 7th-round pick, that's just a steal. In hindsight, if you were to redo it again, what would you be willing to give up for Malik Willis? And I would say, 3rd-round pick, 4th-round pick potentially at this time. And I think that if he continues to play well, if he plays this week with Jordan Love potentially out and plays really well, then I wouldn't be shocked if there were some other teams in the offseason that would potentially want to trade for Malik Willis. And so just thinking about that, let's say the Packers went 0-2 in those 2 starts without Jordan Love. And let's say they lost against the Jaguars because let's say their other backup option, whether it was Sean Clifford, Michael Pratt, if either of those guys had been the backup, I think there's a chance the Packers could have gone 0-3 potentially. And if that had happened, the Packers would currently be sitting at 3-5, which is much different than 6-2. And so a lot of the Packers' success right now does have to do with Malik Willis playing really good, really clean football, very good against the blitz, very good running the ball, escaping pressure. He's been hyper efficient, hasn't turned the ball over, which has been a big factor of his success. Has a 130.3 passer rating, which is the best in the NFL, which is pretty crazy to see. And so the Packers could have easily been 3-5 right now. Let's say you go 1-2 in those games, the Packers would be 4-4, and that's once again much different than 6-2. And so without Malik Willis, the Packers would not be competing for a top spot in the NFC North right now at this point, with the Lions, being in first place with the big game coming up this next week. And I do wonder what's going to happen with Malik Willis, because he's almost playing so good that, I'm almost like, man, he may end up moving on from the Packers just because another team out there may be willing to take a chance on him. He is under contract for 2024 and 2025 on his rookie deal, so a team would need to trade for him potentially after this season. But if he were to stay in this season and next year, he'd be a free agent after the 2025 season. And so I feel like he maybe has played good enough to get another chance starting with another team who feels like they have a situation where Malik could really thrive, because I think he has thrived in Matt LaFleur's scheme and Matt LaFleur's system. I think a lot of it does have to do with Matt LaFleur, his play calling, the Packers being able to run the ball very effectively when he has been playing. But a lot of it also has to do with him making the right reads, making wise decisions, not putting the ball in harm's way like he did in his first year starting 3 times with the Tennessee Titans. And so you have to give Brian Gutekunst a ton of credit because he easily could have sat back and said, you know what, Jordan Love will probably be healthy. He started all 17 games in his first year starting back in 2023. We should be fine. And at the same time, part of me would have understood not trying to trade for another quarterback just because, if you lose Jordan Love, part of me thought, well, what are the odds the Packers actually find ways to win games? And yet, Brian Gutekunst was still able to go out, trade a 7th-round pick for a guy that seemed to show some promise in the preseason this year, and the Packers seemed to get a steal with that move. And then the other big move that happened recently, of course, is the Brandon McManus signing. Now, Gutekunst, I think the decision to draft Anders Carlson ended up not being a great decision, considering the Packers ended up moving on from him. He has found a little success with San Francisco the past couple weeks. He did miss an extra point, so I'm not sure how consistent he's going to be moving forward. But the Packers, around the same time they trade for Malik Willis, they also Narvison from the Tennessee Titans. And after 5 weeks, it was not going well. He had the most missed field goals at 5, I believe it was, after the first 5 weeks. And at that point, it seemed like the Packers had just failed when it came to, really trying to solidify the kicker position ever since Mason Crosby ended up, moving on from the Packers moving on from him. And I just thought it was a much different situation this year versus last year with kicker struggles. Because last year, early on, it's like, okay, the Packers are struggling. The Packers don't necessarily feel like they're in a spot to make a playoff run until later in the season, where that really changed when the Packers really got in a roll as Love really started to play at a top-tier level later in the season. But at this season, it's different because you feel like you have the pieces, you have the offense, you have the defense, and if it comes down to a field goal late in the game, after the first 5 games, I don't think you could trust Narvison when it came to a potential playoff game. And the fact that Brandon McManus was out there and that Gutekunst was willing to go and give him a shot, give him a tryout, and bring him in, that's going to be one of the biggest moves of this entire season, close to as impactful, I think, as the Malik Willis move. And we've already seen it the past 2 weeks, Brandon McManus having 2 game-winning field goals. The Packers easily, if they had Narvison the week before, could have missed that against the Texans. This week it was like a 20-something yarder, so I think Narvison would have made that one potentially. But that's just a few moves, small moves that seem potentially insignificant. Especially with Malik Willis, where you don't know Jordan Love's going to get hurt. But then with McManus, I think there is a little more hope there with him being a veteran. And just those 2 moves on their own have potentially given the Packers an extra 3 wins. They could easily be sitting at 3-5 currently right now. So I think Gutekunst and his scouting team, they do a great job of always going out and trying to find players who maybe, on the surface, you don't think they're going to make that big of an impact. Sort of like the Rasul Douglas signing a few years back, where he's on a practice squad. The Packers signed him. He comes in and plays as a really, really good corner. Gutekunst is good at finding some guys who are cheap, who maybe haven't performed well recently, and then they come to Green Bay, things seem to work out. And of course, any GM is going to make mistakes. You're not going to hit on, most of your draft picks, and Gutekunst has definitely missed on some draft picks, but I think that he's done a much better job overall, drafting Jordan Love. A lot of GMs can't get the quarterback right. That's the most important thing, which the Packers have done consistently for, 30 or so years. So I do think, the decision to trade for Malik Willis, the decision to bring in McManus has really shifted the Packers this season. If you guys want more Packers content, feel free to subscribe down below, and I'll see you guys next time.